So we're going deep today on a story that's really tragic, but also like incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
It starts with, a student suicide,
Right.
a Nepali student in India,
Hmm.
and it kind of blows up into this whole international incident, right? Like it becomes a much bigger issue than just one person's death.
It's kind of one of those where you see how something so personal can become something so much bigger and
Yes.
global so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The report we're looking at is from Vantage with Palki Sharma on N18G First Post.
Okay.
And it's about how this 20-year-old student at the Kalinga Institute of Technology in Odisha, India,
Okay.
he dies by suicide. And it sparks all these protests.
Yeah.
And even like the prime ministers of both countries get involved.
Wow. So you can imagine like being a Nepali student
Yeah.
there, hundreds of miles from home.
Yeah.
And then this happens and there's these allegations that like the authorities ignored his claims of harassment.
Right.
That must have been so unsettling.
Yes.
Like no wonder almost 500 students like took to the streets to protest.
Yeah, you can just feel that sense of like injustice, right?
Totally.
Like their friend was failed by the system that was supposed to protect him.
Yeah.
And then
the university like kicks them out.
I know. They evict the protesting students. It's like,
All
what are
right.
you doing?
Seems like the worst possible thing to do.
Yeah, like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Exactly.
It's like, are you trying to make this worse?
Yeah. You really gotta wonder about the thinking there.
I know, right? And then like out of nowhere,
Yeah.
Nepal's Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, and the Nepal Embassy in India, like they get involved.
Oh, wow.
Demanding the safety of their students
Okay.
and urging the university to let them back in.
This is where it gets really interesting if you follow like international relations and stuff because
yeah.
Nepal sends a lot of students to India for school.
Right.
So this whole thing with the allegations of negligence and the university's reaction,
Yeah,
it could really mess with future student exchanges.
absolutely.
It makes you think about like how institutions handle student welfare, especially with like cultural differences and diplomatic stuff,
Yeah, it makes you wonder if this kind of thing happens in other countries
Yeah.
that have a lot of international students.
Right.
Like, are there like guidelines or something for universities and governments,
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because this isn't just like an isolated incident.
No.
It's about student safety and like understanding different cultures.
Right. It's a global thing.
Yeah, on a global scale.
Yeah, and this case just brought all that to the surface and made India and Nepal deal with it publicly.
Right.
And the university did let the students come back.
It did.
And they set up a 24-hour helpline.
Right.
But is that enough?
But a helpline's like a reaction.
Exactly.
What about preventing this stuff in the first place?
Yeah.
Shouldn't they be like addressing the harassment, making things more inclusive,
For sure.
so that students feel heard and supported?
Absolutely.
This just feels like putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem.
I agree.
And like we can't forget about the lasting impact this has had.
Right.
Like the report mentions protests in Kathmandu demanding justice for the student.
Yeah, and it talks about how strained things are between India and Nepal.
Yeah, it's crazy how much this one event has affected things.
Yeah.
So it's a lot to unpack, right?
It is.
We've got a tragic suicide, allegations of harassment,
Right.
student protests, diplomatic interventions,
Yeah.
strained relations between countries.
It's a lot.
It's like a reminder of how one person's life can impact global politics.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
And it leaves us with like a really tough but important question.
Yeah.
Could this have been prevented?
Hmm.
Like, what can universities and governments and even other students do to make sure international students are safe and well?
Right.
Like, what needs to change to create environments where everyone feels welcome and supported?
It's a big question.
Yeah, those are the things I hope you keep thinking about,
I know I will.
even after this deep dive is over.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Yeah, see you then. Bye.
Bye.